Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Nithsdale Area Committee, which is being live streamed and recorded. The recording will be made available on the Council website for public listening. Now, remote participants, please follow the good practice guide, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting. Writing speak in the Teams chat function when you have to contribute. If you're in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or your iPad. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members, and no material should be posted in the chat function if it's intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting, so we can keep track of whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. And please focus contributions in areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. So, agenda item 1, sediment and apologies. Tracy, can you provide the sediment indicating who's participating remotely, and any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. We've got 13 members present in total, 10 members present in Council HQ, being the Chair, Vice Chair, Councillor Bell, Councillor Beretti, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Dorward, Councillor Maureen Johnson, Councillor Lowe, Councillor Stevenson, Councillor Walters, and 3 participating on Teams, being Councillor Blake, Councillor Hislop and Councillor Jordan. No apologies, Chair, and not present at the start are Councillors Dempster, Ferguson, Malcolm Johnston, Slater and Wood.
I am present, Tracy. Councillor Dempster. Sorry, apologies if I'm a minute or two late.
Oh, lovely to hear from you, Jim. I confirm my agreement to... Oh, yes, John?
Yeah, Councillor Ferguson's in the building. He'll be along in a minute.
Thank you. I confirm my agreement to the participation of members named as participating remotely. So, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? Don't see any in the room or any on Teams. So, minute of the previous meeting of the 29th of September 2022. Are members happy to approve that minute?
Happy to approve.
Thank you. So, item number 4, Education and Learning Directorate End of Year Assessment of Service Plans 2019 to 2023 Performance. Our first performance report today is the Education and Learning from the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 2022. The pandemic was a difficult time for young people and the effects on their education, and I'm pleased to read that the focus on recovery and the reintroduction of activities back into school routines. It's good to read that exclusion rates have decreased across Nithsdale. So we've got Jim Brown will answer any member questions or address any member comments. Do you have anything to add to the report, Jim? You're on mute.
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing to add. Happy to answer questions.
Do members have any questions for Jim? Councillor Beretti.
Thank you, Chair. Just on page 14, it's just a question to build the local economy in priority 1. Given what we've just gone through and what we are going through, is there any plan to modify the way that they're looking at giving this information to within the educational system to kids?
I just wanted, when you say this information, Councillor Beretti, can you be more specific? Which information are we talking about?
Well, it says this helps schools to build a picture of local skills gaps and business information that can be factored into decision making around the senior phase curriculum.
Thank you for that clarification. This is an ongoing process, and what we have in every school, as it mentions, is a DYW coordinator. They form part of what's called an ECG, which is a group in every secondary school that identify as early as we can pathways for young people to go down. There are a number of national groups who contribute to that, most notably in this case Skills Development Scotland, who have got a huge amount of data both on young people and where they end up, but also we can get information on local employers. So I think it's not necessarily because of the pandemic or necessarily something we're needing to do better, but that is already something that is very much part of that ECG process, where we look to our local community area to see what is the job need, the employment need, the training need, and that certainly informs what secondary schools do for their curriculums, but it certainly also informs what we provide through the ECGs in terms of targeting young people to specific destinations.
Thanks, Jim. Does that answer your query, Councillor?
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Okay.
Councillor Bretty.
Councillor Dorward, are you wishing to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jim, for the report. Referring to page 15, 3.8.3 and KPIs about exclusion rates for looked after children. So 3.8.3 states that 13.06 per 100,000 pupils are excluded from school, and with looked after children the numbers are 44.44 per 100,000 from 73.33, which is good, but it's still much higher than the average. Could you perhaps expand on that a little bit, please, and tell what's in place to reduce that further? It's quite a big gap between both rates. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a huge gap, isn't it? And this is absolutely something we're very much focused on. And certainly now every exclusion which relates to a young person who is or has been looked after and accommodated, that needs to then be discussed with myself as of this year. So we are absolutely scrutinising those exclusions very, very closely. I'm glad you note, thank you for that, Councillor Dorwood, that this rate has dropped significantly, and I believe that's because we have made it very clear to our head teachers that we need to look at alternatives. If I could possibly put you in the direction of included, engaged, involved, part 2, which is a government documentation which describes exactly what's expected in terms of exclusions. And beyond that, we have a looked after team who are working very closely with schools to support specific young people who are from looked after and accommodated backgrounds. So I share your concern in this area. I share your clear desire, Councillor Dorwood, to make this number, as I say in the report, aspirationally 0. But we also need to make sure that we remember, and I remember, and head teachers remember, that in the end, it's the causes of those exclusions that we need to look at, not simply making the exclusion rate 0, which I think does have some benefit because it makes sure young people feel that they are not being, psychologically, if you like, excluded from a school building. But it's more about the supports we are going to put in place to make sure that this group of young people are able to function in those school environments such that these situations don't occur. But thank you for your focus on that, Councillor Dorwood.
You happy with that? Thanks very much for that, Jim. Any other member questions? I don't see anything more, so we can move to recommendations. Members are asked to, 1, consider the Education and Learning Directorate area-based successes and developments as detailed in the Key Successes section in this report, paragraphs 3.7 to 3.11.8. And 2, scrutinise the area report for Nithsdale as set out in Appendix 1. 3, review the attainment summary of Nithsdale in 2020 to 2021 as set out in Appendix 2, and consider any aspects of performance to be referred to the relevant future committee. Are members happy with this? Councillor Dorwood?
Thank you again, Chair. I would ask that in terms of any aspects of performance to be referred to relevant future committee, there would be some feedback on looked after children question that I asked earlier. Thank you.
Did you get that, Jim?
Thank you very much for that, Chair and Councillor Dorwood. I will do that. Thank you.
So, are members happy otherwise with that inclusion?
Agreed.
Our next report this morning is the Scottish Fire and Rescue Services performance update from April 2021 to 30th of March 2022. Members will recall that this item was deferred from our last meeting, and I'm pleased to say we have Scott Irvine, Group Commander, here to answer any member questions or address any member comments. It is noted, Scott, that there is an increase in nearly all the reporting areas, and we understand this is due to the previous reporting period being during lockdown, and these percentages reflect the year-on-year performances. Do members have any questions for Scott? Councillor Bell?
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. Obviously, on page 55, we're looking about deliberate fire settings. I know it was 6 months ago, and incidents per population very high in my ward for North West Dumfries there. It seems to be alarming, deliberate fires. I know we had a major fire at the convent there in May this year, and as you members of the public will probably know that a youth has been charged at last for that offence. But how, obviously, looking at deliberate fires across North West Dumfries and across the rest of the wards, are we seeing a trend that we're getting more, or is it just this area of Dumfries and Galloway? As I know we've had a lot of problem with antisocial behaviour and kids out of control and they're moving from one place to another place. I just wonder, are you working with the partner agencies on this one as well? Because it does look alarming when we're seeing North West Dumfries going through the roof. Just wondering what an update on that, please.
Thanks, Councillor Bell. Scott, are you able to answer that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bell. Yeah, obviously I appreciate the statistics that you see in terms of the report are quite startling in comparison to other wards. But I'd like to offer the elected members some reassurance that the service is committed to driving down deliberate fire setting. We have a strong community action team with a clear focus on community engagement across not just North West Dumfries but across the whole of Dumfries and Galloway. And again, obviously, we have an education programme which is obviously geared towards the dangers of deliberate fire setting, especially in relation, we've done a piece of work over the last year in relation to particular issues with the derelict buildings. So you've obviously mentioned the convent, so the convent being one of those buildings, but there's other derelict buildings across the Nithsdale ward that we have been dealing with. Just to give members some reassurance that what that education looks like is that obviously our community action team, along with the local stations, are working to provide engagement opportunities, and we've used that through the pandemic. We've used a range of activities. So whilst we've not had that direct engagement as a result of COVID, we've looked to secure alternative means to get that community safety message across in that engagement. So we've worked with Youth Work to develop videos and target messaging. We've used technology in terms of TikTok and social media platforms to get that community safety message across. So we are working very much with our partners to drive on that. We've had multi-agency meetings with owners of premises of vacant buildings to try and identify and secure those buildings, to limit access to vacant buildings, to try and drive down deliberate fire setting in and around these areas. I hope that gives Councillor Bell some reassurance in terms of the activities that are currently ongoing to drive down deliberate fire setting.
Thanks, Scott. You happy with that response?
I was happy with the comments regarding there, what you were saying, but obviously, working with the youth and trying to engage them, trying to stop deliberate fire setting and various fires across the region. The problem is there's no deterrent when they catch these. And you just look at this youth who's been charged. What's he or she going to get? £50 fine, a couple of hundred hours community service. We're not. The problem is not just the fire service. They're doing a good job. There's no deterrent when these kids do something. There's no deterrent. The country's going soft.
Thanks for those comments, Councillor Bell. Councillor Stevenson?
Hi, Scott. Thank you for coming today. I had a brief discussion with some of the representatives for the Fire Brigade. North West Dumfries is my ward as well. And that was back in June. And part of that discussion was getting back into schools, to talk through that education programme with youths. How successful has that been? Obviously, this report's from March, so that'll have had time to implement that education scheme. How successful has it been in deterring youth from starting these fires?
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Obviously, in terms of education, so yes, the service still run our Operation Safety East and West. So whilst that we have continued to run that, and that programme has been in place for over 20 years and has been very successful in addressing that. In terms of other work that's been ongoing in terms of restrictions, we have obviously been in schools providing information to those schools, and again we've done joint patrols in and around hotspots. We've been in schools to have that discussion with our colleagues. So I'm just confirming for you that what we've done is we've looked at providing, we've done fire safety talks in schools, and again that's been a combination of through Microsoft Teams, and again through actual videos that we've produced. In terms of secondary schools, we've always had engagement with both the Easter holiday period and the summer period, and again that was replicated again in September of last year and March of this year. So we have been in the schools trying to have that direct engagement and try to make up for the lack of engagement that we've experienced through COVID. In terms of obviously the impact that's had, it's really hard to quantify that. We have that engagement sessions, but it's the success of that will be borne out in the statistics moving forward. I think it's the only true we will see any kind of improvement in statistics if the messages are landing with that. I hope that answers your question.
You happy with that, Paula?
Just a follow-on one. See, when we talk about going into schools, is that right throughout the borough and not just in North West Dumfries? I'm just very conscious of the fact teenagers these days all hang about together. I would hate to think it was just one particular area when these kids are attending all sorts of schools and potentially aren't in school. Do you know that one was arrested the other day, was 19. So are you going to colleges as well for that discussion?
Yeah, so in terms of primary school engagement, so the Operation Safety is the key messaging that we use, and that's obviously targeted at primary 7-year-old pupils, and that's obviously a multi-agency approach that looks at all elements of safety for young people. So that's the key messaging that we do. So that's done east and west across the region for all primary 7-year students. On top of that, we do have engagement sessions in our secondary schools. We are engaging with local colleges. So we have done work with the local college, further education colleges, the Barney College. And again, there's messaging around not just fires, but the wider safety messaging and driving and stuff like that. So we're conscious that yes, whilst the focus is on education in terms of primary and secondary school, we are trying to engage with those other groups who are not in that setting. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Stevenson.
Thanks for that. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Provost. Good morning, Scott. I think I've asked you this once before in a different setting, but if we accept that you're normally first in the scene of an emergency, right? In general terms, that's the case. You were training some of your team or teams up to almost advanced paramedic level, and it stalled because I remember that was relayed at the Community Planning Partnership. Okay, so it was on at the time, and I'm just wondering what progress has been made, because I know they were negotiating with the FBU. Is it still on the cards? Are you still able to do that? Because your teams are still faced with that same situation where they're not quite helpless, but not as well trained as they could be. So I'd be interested in your views on that.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson, and thank you, Chair, for the question. Just to confirm, so the current position that you've alluded to was obviously the discussions centred around the broadening of the role of the firefighter. And one of those elements of the broadening role of the firefighter was that increased emergency medical response. Obviously, that was put to the membership of the Fire Brigades Union just over about 2 years ago, and that initial offer was rejected. So the work that was around that had stalled, but there has been further ongoing dialogue between the employers and the FBU since that outcome, and there is progress being made on that, the broadening of the role, but that work is currently is obviously we appreciate we're currently in a dispute in industrial action, so any work that has been done in the broadening role of the firefighter across the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service is currently on hold just now, whilst we address the immediate industrial action. But there is some engagement with the employers and the union on that, what the broadening of the role will look like, and certainly that improved emergency medical response is an element of that. But there will be no progress at this time until obviously we address the current industrial action. But I give reassurance to the members that the firefighters are trained to what we call ICAT, which is that's the medical intervention that we get, so that makes sure that all firefighters are trained to use defibs and provide emergency first aid to casualties on scene. So that's about stabilising casualties till we can get them to medical care. So whilst we are not developing that role broader at the moment, I'd like to give reassurances that all firefighters across the area have that ICAT qualification and can provide immediate emergency medical assistance to stabilise casualties. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Ferguson.
Because I think we were trying to follow the North American model where effectively they were like an extra part of the NHS, or worked very closely with the NHS, and they were a much higher standard than first aiders. And I think that was what the plan was at the time. That was certainly the impression we got. So it's a work in progress, I think is what you're saying, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it absolutely is, Councillor Ferguson. Like I say, there is that broadening of the role is still being discussed, and it will be, like I say, after the industrial action, it will something that will be a focus for the service moving forward.
Councillor Slater.
Yes, this is a question for Scott. It's basically maintenance, Scott. Can you tell me why fire hydrants don't appear to be being maintained? There's a garden that used to be painted up where people could find them so that nobody would park near them. And this doesn't appear to be happening nowadays. And also, is water pressure checked regularly on these fire hydrants? And will they be made visible in the future? Thank you.
I'm not sure. Could you hear that question?
I heard, obviously, the basic of the question was about the process for maintaining and servicing our fire hydrants, if I'm correct. Is that correct, Councillor Slater, yeah?
Yes, it's about the fire hydrants that don't appear to be being maintained or painted and made visible to where they actually are. And could you explain that, please? Thank you.
Well,
sorry, Scott. Can I ask members if they speak right into the microphones, because it's not very audible, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question, Councillor Slater. I would just like to confirm that the service do have a dedicated hydrant operative appointed within the local area. So the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service across the wider area have a number of hydrant operatives, and we have one located in Dumfries and Galloway. So their job on a day-to-day basis is to go around and prioritise and service and maintain and test hydrants. So in relation to your question, they do get painted and they're being checked and serviced. So you'll appreciate that's not an easy task, so there's quite a lot of hydrants across the area. In relation to Dumfries in particular, the watches within the whole time station still have a requirement to go out and test and inspect hydrants within the Nithsdale area. That is supported by the hydrant operative, so that individual will support the whole time station in Dumfries, but they will also take on that responsibility across the rest of the region. And obviously you'll appreciate that's a rolling programme of work. So whilst it may appear that hydrants in your local area might not be getting tested and serviced and maintained, I'd like to reassure members that there is a programme, a cycle in place for that work to be carried out. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Slater.
Well, I must admit, I don't see much of this actually happening. As regarding the painting, you say this is happening ongoing, but they seem to be getting more and more in poorer condition as regarding. So I don't see any evidence of painting. I can go to take you some now where they're just not painted, and I think that they should be made visible, because vehicles could park too close to them or actually virtually on top of them. So I think, and also I would like to say that the water pressure is the water pressure being checked, because the water pressure tends to go up and down quite a lot within Dumfries. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Slater. Just to confirm, yes, painting of the hydrants is an element of the testing process. So for your members' awareness, when a hydrant is tested, obviously we connect a standpipe, we connect it to make sure that we have a flow of water. In terms of your point in regarding the flow of water from a hydrant, we can, if we have reason to, test that flow, but that's not a part of the normal test. We are just testing that we can actually get a supply of water from the hydrant. If there's a specific issue with a flow, then obviously that can be reported and we can feed that back into Scottish Water, because that's an issue for them. We are actually just testing that we have access, that the hydrant is clearly visible, that it's not leaking. If there's any repairs, we would take a note of the damage and submit those repairs back to our hydrant planning team to get those repairs progressed. But I would like to reassure members that you'll appreciate we have a large geographical area. We have one individual who is tasked to do that job, and they're on their workload is a rolling programme of repair. So that whilst you may see hydrants that look in a poor state of repair, there is a programme in place to address that. So hopefully that gives you some reassurance and some comfort.
Thanks for that response, Scott. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate this is the report up until March 22, but we are seeing increasing numbers of road traffic accidents at the moment, and I'm just wondering if yourselves actually work at all proactively with the police service. I know we'll come up to a Christmas campaign with drink driving and stuff, but about are you in schools talking to young people at all about issues which might actually make them think about safer driving?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Lowe. So just for members' awareness, we are actively engaged with our partners in terms of road safety. So the fire service are a key member of the local road safety partnership, and we have done a piece of work, obviously developing the road safety app within D&G, the D&G Travel Safe. So there is a lot of work that's went in with it through the road safety partnership to get that app up and running, and we secured £10,000 worth of funding to facilitate the development of that app. So that obviously is for access for everybody across the whole of the region. In relation to the schools, so yeah, we are engaging with the schools to have road safety events. And that, to give you some examples, we take it right back to early years. So for our nursery age children, we start with an event that's called Street Feet, and that's about actually teaching the young people about road safety and road awareness. So crossings, how to keep safe in terms of when they're out and about on the street. So we take road safety really seriously, and it starts at a very young age. If we expand that to what we've talked about in terms of operation safety, so the primary schools part of the operation safety element is around road safety. So there is an input there again around road safety. We have done work as well in secondary schools and in further education establishments. We've done sessions just over the last year in terms of the young drivers at the Barney College and stuff like that. So it's to address those individuals and young people who are not in education but have just left education or in employment, have money, have work, and obviously access to vehicles. So we're trying to capture as many different groups of individuals or road users across the area. And whilst we have an increase in road collisions, it's really to ensure that the actual the impact and the consequences of injuries for casualties is low, is relatively low in real terms. So there's a lot of positive work going on by the service and our partners to improve road safety. And again, part of the road safety partnerships work is around about also engineered solutions. So we're looking at where we can engineer out risks and hazards in our road network to keep road users safe. But you'll appreciate that some of the figures that you see it's a challenge because we have a lot of transient people in terms of the road infrastructure. So a lot of the activity we see in terms of road traffic collisions in the wider area is a result of people who are either accessing or travelling through the area and maybe not necessarily local individuals. So there's an element of those types of people that obviously affect our figures. So hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Lowe.
Thanks for that, Scott. When I was at school, it was the Tufty Club. I'm sure it's far more sophisticated now. Councillor Walters.
Can I just come back to the report about unwanted fire alarm signals, which is the page 57, page 11 on your report. Just because Nith, which is obviously which is my ward, is leader of the pack in terms of unwanted fire alarm signals by ward area. And I'd sort of made some assumptions about it being to do with businesses in the town centre, but I wondered if there was any detail about why Nithward is so high in terms of unwanted fire alarm signals, and whether you thought that was going to carry on happening.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. In terms of the Nithward, obviously you'll appreciate that, so in terms of unwanted fire alarm signals, predominantly in commercial premises. So obviously, in terms of the legislation, so UFAS is a term that we use for unwanted fire alarm signals in commercial premises. So in terms of obviously the disposition of industry and businesses, where you have a concentration of commercial properties, it's realistic to expect and relative to see an increase or a spike or a higher overall number of UFAS incidents. Again, the service works very closely with all duty holders of commercial premises to identify it very early where we think we're seeing a spike in UFAS activity. We have a policy within the service where we actively engage at set triggers for engagement, but as a local level, we actually go in before that threshold. So if we see 1 or 2 UFAS in a particular premises, we will automatically have direct engagement with the duty holders. That starts with the initial attending crew, so they will gather information about the nature of the UFAS, its location, the cause. We gather all that relevant information, and that is then fed back into our fire safety enforcement teams. And it's our fire safety enforcement teams that will have that direct engagement after the incident with the duty holder to establish, this is if it's a repeat incident in the same location, what's the cause, what action can be taken to mitigate any future activities. So to answer your question, why do you see an increase in the Nithward? In real terms, it's around about the numbers of businesses within a particular geographical area. But rest assured that we are proactively engaging with duty holders to try and drive that down, because you'll appreciate that UFAS accounts for over 50% of our operational activity in the fire service, and the service has taken a position that moving forward into 2023 that we are going to change our response model to UFAS incidents. So where we currently respond to all UFAS incidents, the service is looking at, and again it's an appendix within the report, we are looking to change that response model. So we will only respond to incidents of UFAS where we have a confirmed fire. So hopefully that answers your question, Councillor.
You happy with that, Keith?
Yeah, I'm happy with that, thanks.
Councillor Campbell.
Thanks, Provost. Good morning, Scott. Nice to see you again. I know the report is an annual report and it takes us up to March this year, but what particularly caught my attention was the home fire safety visits on page 40, where 556 fire alarms across Nithsdale, just under half were interlinked alarms, and bearing in mind the new regulations that just came in at the start of the year, I would assume that all new alarms will be the interlinked alarms, but I'm just wondering if there's been an increase in demand since March this year. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Yeah, to answer your question, yes, in terms of the new legislation that has been issued by the Scottish Government, when that was issued initially, it did, and it has created an increase in inquiries for our home fire safety visits. But obviously you'll appreciate that in terms of funding, the services has an allocated budget in terms of the money it spends on interlinked alarms. So obviously, whilst the legislation is that all properties moving forward should comply with the new legislation, and what that means for our business is that obviously we have a limited supply of interlinked alarms. So we use the home fire safety visit process as a means to do that risk rating. So we gather the information from that visit, and from that visit we can determine the risk rating. So we're looking to target those individuals who are extremely high risk or high risk, and who have no working smoke alarms, and it's those individuals that we would look to put interlinked alarms in. And we do have also obviously single point detectors, so people who are obviously classed as medium and low risk, we would make sure they have automatic detection, but again our focus, because of our limited resources, has to be targeted towards those who are extremely high risk and vulnerable. That demand though has dropped as the longer the legislation has been in place and people are becoming more aware. And there's other partnerships, so when we can't identify or we can't support a linked alarm being fitted into a property, we will direct those individuals to other partnerships and other initiatives that maybe can support them in terms of securing funding. And I know that the Nithsdale Area Committee has provided additional funding to allow that to happen. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Provost.
You happy, John? Okay. Councillor Dempster.
Thanks. Good morning, Provost. Now, Scott. I'm intrigued with the response you gave to David Slater on his question about fire hydrants. Having served in the retained for 20 years, one of the benefits of going round fire hydrants with local firefighters was they learned the location and familiarised themselves with some were more challenging than others to access. And we now stick posts or markers on walls, etc., rather than just maybe use yellow paint. But my concern is, are you telling me that we no longer have familiarisation routine checks by local firefighters? Because that was a real benefit, especially to newer firefighters. I know there'll be a map on the computer now that will direct them to that. But it's not quite the same as going and seeing them in person, operating them, see how they work, see how the flow is, and generally understand the network of fire hydrants in every locality. I'm really concerned if that has changed somehow now to just a central checking system. Can you advise me what the current status is, please?
Yes, thanks for the question, Councillor Dempster. I can confirm your point. Yes, going back, your understanding is correct. Historically, the fire services, the local crews would go out and test hydrants as part of that routine maintenance and that awareness of the risk within their local area. You'll appreciate that was a number of years ago. We have predominantly retained crews across the region, so those are individuals who work in a primary employment and then they respond to the station to deal with an incident from their primary employment. So that's the kind of model we have across the area. So the use of a hydrant operative fills that gap, because obviously you'll appreciate the challenges we have in terms of availability. So getting people to be available, outside their primary employment to do all these additional tasks is a challenge. So one of the ways the services can address that is to have a dedicated individual who, has a role and programme to do that work. I would like to offer reassurances that yes, local crews will still gather information on the hydrants, because we are doing work to gather information on operational intelligence, which is information about specific risks within station ground areas. So part of that is going around those premises, gathering information, and part of that information gathering is looking at water supplies, hydrants, alternative firefighting water supplies. So whilst our retained crews aren't necessarily going out and doing hydrant testing as you would historically understand it, they are going out and still engaging in their community, still gathering that information. But it's just a different approach, and that's about managing the competing demands and the workloads of our staff, especially when we have a predominantly retained model. So hopefully that gives you some reassurance that whilst it is different, we are achieving the same outcome. And you've alluded to the fact that information is on computers, so every fire appliance does have a mobile data terminal, and on that data terminal there's hydrant maps which clearly identify the location of the map. They provide a 6-figure grid reference. They confirm the size of the main and obviously the distance of that from the risk area. So we have lots of information there that can assist crews. But yeah, crews are still out and about, so they're still doing familiarisation when they're going out and doing those OI visits and getting that familiarisation. But it's different from what was done historically. So hopefully that answers your question.
Are you happy with that, Jim?
Obviously, Provost, I'm a dinosaur now, but I accept that. I don't think it's maybe just helpful, no, for the local crews, but we are where we are. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Councillor Barretta, you wish to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just reference to page 58. I've got two questions, so this is my first question. In reference to the on-call firefighters and the employee profile. Now, I've noticed that Sanker Thornhill, the stats between early morning and late afternoon are fairly different, so the totals are relatively high. But what does this mean for when a tender has to go out? Is it fully staffed? Is it partially staffed? And also, along with that, is the employee profile, is it changing substantially, and do they envisage how that is going to change and how it's going to impact on the the ability for the service to actually deal with whatever incident and the manpower going out, or the human power going out.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Beretti. In relation to your observations in relation to Sanker and Thornhill, so yes, there is obviously particular challenges at set times in the day. We have, like I say, an on-call model across the vast majority of the region, so that relies on individuals giving up their time from their primary employment. You'll appreciate, and this is one of the challenges that we've had through the pandemic, we've seen an increase in our availability through the pandemic with individuals working from home and obviously being closer to their local stations. So it's natural as we come out of the pandemic that as people go back to their normal working lives, or perhaps have to take on new jobs because their old job isn't there, that ultimately has an impact on our availability. So we have seen a downturn across the area in terms of that availability. It's not got back to the kind of pre-pandemic levels. So what the service is actively doing is we have a number of options available to us to bolster those stations when we notice that they have a low availability. So we can use standby crews, so we can in some cases use the standby crew from Dumfries to go and support Sanker and Thornhill and Upper Nithsdale in terms of those occasions. But what we've also done more recently is we are engaged in a pilot locally to use capacity from other on-call stations. So we will have on-call stations where we maybe have more than enough to crew a fire appliance. We would look to then allocate to see if those individuals would be prepared to work at another location. So that then would bolster the availability. So, for example, if we had for 3 people on at Thornhill, for example, and Sanker was off, if we could look to our bank workers or flexible workers, we would then deploy somebody, drop them into a Thornhill station to bring that up to a crew of 4, and that would maintain, that's the minimum that we would need for a crew to mobilise. So we're doing that piece of work. So we're looking at where we have capacity in other parts of the business across the area, and then trying to redeploy that into those areas where we have predicted shortfalls. We use an electronic availability program called GARTAN that allows us to forecast appliance availability. So we have also rural support watch commanders who work in each of the 4 districts across Dumfries and Galloway. Their job is to do that kind of oversight of the GARTAN system, identify those pinch points where availability is low, and then do that engagement with our flexible working individuals to backfill that. Does that answer your question?
That's part of it, the employee profile that I was asking about. So that's only the first part of my question, because I have another question, Chair.
In terms of the employee profile, it is changing. So it is. You'll appreciate that the way people work has a significant impact on how we provide that response. The service have engaged with a new process to help identify and retain on-call firefighters. The program, the initiative is called PrEP, so it's a pre-employment engagement process to try and identify people in the local area and expedite them through the selection process, so we can get them, identify people much quicker, get them on training courses quicker, so we can actually get them on station, because we have historically, it's the timescale from starting somebody inquiring to join the service to actually being on station can be up to 6 months historically. So we're trying to improve the work profile by expediting that process. We've also engaging with the community so to look at alternative places. So we're engaging with schools and stuff and other employers to see if we can identify people who are maybe not in employment because they have childcare issues. So we can, if they're not working because they've got childcare issues, can we provide them a contract so we can provide an improved daytime availability. So we're looking at all options in terms of that work profile to see if we can get increase our availability. It's a real challenge at this moment in time.
And you have another point, Councillor Beretti?
Yes, thanks. That's fascinating. It's building up a picture of the service. The second question is, within the Nithsdale area, can the service access all areas? And that means on every single road that the council have in their portfolio, and what would be the consequences if we can't? Because clearly the severity of an event is dependent on the time it takes for the service to get there.
Thank you for your second question, Councillor Beretti. The service, will respond to any incident. We have a range of appliances of different sizes, so access. So yes, in terms of our topography, we have some access issues and some challenges and get into places, but we have a mix of different types of appliances that allow us to overcome those physical elements. In terms of the practicalities of obviously responding to incidents, we have strategic mobilisation locations across the area. So back to my earlier point about the work that we do in terms of our reviewing Gartan and obviously putting people into stations to support stations, that's done on a risk-based process. So we will look to have key pumps across identified areas within D&G. So we have different levels of availability. So as appliance availability may change, we would look to move appliances and make sure that we have key appliances staffed within key areas, so they can provide that response to all areas of Dumfries and Galloway across a 24-hour period. So whilst we have 70 appliances covering the whole of the region, we have strategic locations. So we know if we have an anticipated gap within a particular area, we would look to then put an appliance into that area to provide that strategic resilience to each district. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Scott. I don't see any more hands up either on Teams or in the room, so can we... Sorry? Oh, sorry. Councillor Slater, you wish to come back in?
Yes, it's a question for Scott again. It's regarding interlink alarms, and the fact is probably the cost, because there's several companies offer that work, but they vary in price greatly. And also, would it affect people's insurance if they don't have this work done or have interlink alarms? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Slater. Yes, there is a significant cost associated with the interlinked alarms for individuals. So that's back to my previous point. That's why the service has a key focus on the most vulnerable within our communities, because obviously we have a limited supply of these alarms, so we need to maximise those at greatest risk to ensure they have this, the means to respond should they suffer from a fire. In terms of your point in relation to will it affect insurance, I'm not in a position to provide any advice, obviously, as you'll appreciate, in terms of individuals' own insurance. That's a matter for individuals. So whether you be a private tenant or you are a tenant within a social landlord, that responsibility would lie with the individual of that property, unfortunately.
Thanks. Thank you, Scott. And actually, Councillor Slater, this in last council term, this particular committee provided a large amount of funding to help people in purchasing and installing these alarms, because we were aware that there would be difficulties for some families. So we'll move to recommendations now. Members are asked to scrutinise the performance report, which I think we have duly done. Thank you for that, Scott. For Nithsdale from this the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service for the period 1st April 2021 to 31st of March 2022 as detailed in the appendices. Thanks for coming here, Scott, and answering robust questions. We see by the report how busy you are, so we do really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
So move on to item number 6, Health and Social Care Performance Management Reporting for Area Committee business meetings. It's a report overview, so the report highlights the logistical challenges of delivering COVID vaccinations, and it is mentioned that uptake in D&G was higher than the Scottish average, which is really good to hear. Alison Solly and Janet McDougall will answer any member questions or address any member comments. Ladies, do you have anything to add to your report, or are you just happy to take questions?
Thank you, Chair. We're very happy to take questions.
Thank you. Do we have any member questions on this item? Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. Hi both. It's on page 72.4. It says in here Sexual Assault Response Coordination Service. The adult service has now embedded locally in management. However, our paediatric and young people cases are still being seen in Wishaw and Archway respectively. Why is that? Why can't we do them locally? It seems an awful long way to send people who will be in a certain amount of distress. Thank you.
Would you like to come in and answer that?
Thank you. The main reason for that is because of the specialisms, and we have very, very, very few, fortunately, cases, and therefore it's the specialist nature of the examination that's required. Obviously, in those bigger areas, there are people who do those examinations all more regularly, and therefore that's why the cases go there. Although I do accept absolutely that it's a long way for people to travel.
Thanks for that. Councillor Dempster?
Thanks, Provost. And that's just an observation for Alison, but, you know, in your report on page 68, and it's encouraging to read that there is no longer likely to be an overwhelming number of patients going into hospital due to COVID-19. And then your report goes on to say that folk in Nithsdale that are going into cottage hospitals are supported in Thomas Hope, Annan, Castle Douglas. You know, you might as well try and get to the moon from Kirkconnell and Sanquhar as get to Langham for Kirkconnell and Sanquhar. So the very idea that these people will be able to link with their immediate families or family support really challenging. And I know you refer to Thornhill Hospital, and I have a meeting with Thornhill Community Council and some of your colleagues about the future of Thornhill Hospital. But it's really no, as I say, it's an observation. I don't expect you'll have a solution for it. But it's not really a solution that folk from Nithsdale are sent to Langham as the best option when they come out of hospital, because for personal and social reasons, it's just for me the wrong place. But again, it's an observation, Alison. I know you won't have a cure or a solution today, and I'm sure we'll discuss that further with your colleagues when we meet in Thornhill next month. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Jim. Is there any other member questions? Councillor Ferguson.
It's not so much a question, actually, it's a commendation, because I'm looking at 2.2 Hera Grange on page 69. I think we've turned a derelict site into really, really productive use of that land, and I think a lot of credit has to go to the teams who actually managed to pull this all together, including our partners in the Turning Point, and I think it's Lorburn, isn't it? Yeah. So for me, it's in my ward. I'm delighted to see it in the state it's in now, with people getting the benefit of high quality, warm houses, rather than having a derelict building. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Ferguson. That's a fair and accurate point. Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Referring to page 66, the General Manager's introduction, and I appreciate that it's retrospective, this report, but the last bullet point at 1.1, more people are waiting for health appointments and they're waiting longer to be seen. Could you provide some more information on that, please, in terms of then and now? Has that situation improved, or is it the same, or is it deteriorating? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dorward. I think that comment was in relation to the fact that during COVID, a lot of routine appointments were probably delayed, and now that the surge plan is not in place any longer, we're trying to catch up with the more routine appointments. I can't give you any more detail on the data, but were you to want that, we can certainly ask for that from our colleagues in Performance and Intelligence.
Would you like that information, Councillor Dorward?
That would be really useful. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Could we have that circulated to all members, or would you like it to come back to another committee, or circulated beforehand?
No, thanks, Chair. Just circulated is fine. It's just the data, not a report. Thank you very much.
That's lovely. Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. Page 67, the mention of GP practices. I think it's just more an observation to make that I think many people still see if they can't see their GP, they're not getting a service. But many GP practices now have bases for health visitor, for district nurses. They've obviously got the practice nurses and pharmacists. And very often some of these people are more trained than the GP to say, look at a medication that is needed. And it's how do we educate people that the GPs are a base for a team of people with different skills.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Councillor Lowe. Is there any more comments or questions? I don't see anything. Don't see anything in the room or on Teams, so we'll go to recommendations that members agree. So members are asked to review and scrutinise the overall summary of performance outlined in the appendix, to consider whether the actions proposed are adequate to improve performance and future monitoring in areas which have not met the target, and recognise the areas of good practice, high performance where the target has been exceeded, and recommend any matters from the appendix back for consideration by the Integration Joint Board where considered appropriate. Members happy to read this? Thank you. Thank you very much, Alison and Janet, for coming along. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. Item 7, social work. The next item on the agenda concerns the social work service end of year assessment of business plan. Members are asked to review the overall summary of performance and to consider area-based successes and developments as detailed in the report. The report highlights the increased workload on social work services staff due to increased demand and legislation changes, I'll just say. It is commendable to read the good practice has been maintained and improved during a difficult period due to staff flexibility. This has also been highlighted in areas of children and families, and the reduction of staffing levels by 30% seems concerning for officers and members. Stephen Morgan will answer any members' questions or address any member comments. Do you have anything to add to the report, Stephen, or just happy to
take questions, Chair?
Right, thanks. Members, any members have any questions for Stephen? Councillor Dorward.
Thanks again, Chair. Thanks, Stephen. Page 76, 3.4.10, we experienced significant changes in the workforce with a reduction of 30% of our staff for a significant time period over this period. Can I ask, without going into tremendous detail, why that was, and has that been remedied now? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. The reasons for the loss of staff were varied. We've seen quite a few members of staff who were due to retire later, who decided to do so because of the pressures that were around during the pandemic, from a personal perspective as well as a professional one. We had a number of staff who kind of worked from out with Dumfries and Galloway, who chose to work elsewhere because it was easier, because there was lots of jobs, but also with remote working, not only does it make it easier for us to get people to work, live elsewhere and work here, but the converse was also true. So very different reasons. It's been partly remedied, is the best way to put that. We've been hugely successful in recruiting newly qualified staff. Part of that was because we opened up a number of opportunities over the holiday period throughout the pandemic and took students in. And the children's services element of that, out of 12 students over the summer of the reporting period, we employed 5 of those almost immediately, whereas in the past we might have seen 1 or 2. Having said that, that does give us some considerable challenges around the amount of support that those staff need. It's over and above. They can't do the full range of child protection work, for example, so there's still considerable pressure. So partly remedied. We still have vacancies across the region as we speak, but no more than we would anticipate having in any given moment in time. So that 30% is alarming, right to point that out, but we have remedied to a degree. I would be absolutely remiss of me not to mention that we've also employed some of our own Grow Your Own staff who finished the training in that time, and I know members have been keen on that in the past, but that's a fantastic success for us locally.
You happy with that? Any other questions? No, nothing in the room, nothing online, so we'll move to recommendations. Members are asked to review the overall summary of performance within the Chief Social Work Officer's business plan in the Nithsdale area. Consider the additional area-based successes and developments as detailed in the key successes section of this report, paragraph 3.4 to 3.4.19, and consider any aspects of performance to be referred to the relevant future committee. Are members happy with that? Thank you. We'll move on to item 8. Our next performance report is from the Communities Directorate. It is pleasing to see the amount of detail in this report and the positive impacts on our local communities. The work with young people in terms of counselling in schools impacting on mental health improvement, also the positive feedback from young people engaging in the Summer of Play 2021. We have Richard Grieveson will answer any members' questions or address any members' comments. Do you have anything to add, Richard, or are you happy just to go to questions?
Thank you, Chair. Just through you, I thought it would be useful just to highlight to members the 3 performance measures where status at year end fell below the target, which is on page 95-96 of the report. The first one is the number of farms checked, where we achieved 229 against a target of 300. That was due to the service being affected by the local outbreak of avian influenza from November onwards. The second performance measure was the Trusted Traders Scheme, where we had 175 against a target of 200. Each year, an audit of the membership in April ensures that the standards are maintained from those on the scheme, and if traders fall short of the compliance measures, then their membership is suspended, and the colleagues work with them in the second part of the year to increase that and address those measures, as well as any new businesses that then come on the scheme. And the third one is around food inspections, where we had 412 against a target of 516, and that was due to the Food Standards Agency requiring services to re-risk all food businesses at the beginning of 21-22, and therefore the council inspection and service programme did not commence until later in the year. But as I note through you, Chair, that Sandra Harkness, the service manager for those areas, is also on a Teams call today, so if members have any more detailed questions, then I'm sure Sandra will pick them up.
That's great. Thanks very much for that update, Richard. Do members have any questions for Richard or indeed for Sandra? Councillor Walters.
Can I just ask a question about, on page 88, the things about attendances at swimming pools and attendances at indoor sports facilities. I've noticed that on a couple of other committees I'm sitting on, we get comparisons to pre-COVID. So we can see what sort of bounce back there has actually been, so that we can see whether we're getting stuff back. So is it possible to get the details for those for 2019 compared to 2019, rather than just a comparison to the year when a lot of these places were actually closed?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Walters. Absolutely, I'm more than happy to speak to the service manager and have that information circulated to all members. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Richard. Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Provost. Just a couple of observations and then a complaint. I'm happy with the Councillor Walters' request, because someone I was going to ask. It's nice to see how many people are actually physically attending rather than get a percentage. And I think the complaint, if you like, on page 87, 319.1, it talks about physical activity sessions for those with a disability or additional support needs, and it says introduction disability support walk fit sessions in Dumfries had been a successful addition to the programme. Well, there's another leisure centre in Nithsdale, and I don't see any reference to these kind of sessions being brought there. I also I think it was a few months ago, complained because there's a whole week of swimming programmes in Dumfries for disabled folk, and we have a 5-star leisure centre in Upper Nithsdale and no sessions there. So I'm concerned that we are concentrating, if you like, our support for folk with disabilities and additional needs in one particular area of Nithsdale, and that's not really helpful. And I don't think that's what members, nor indeed staff, want to see. So I'd be keen to see an approach to broaden, if you like, the offer for every member of society in Mid and Upper Nithsdale as well as Nithsdale, and not just specifically for an area, because to ask folk with disabilities to pay transport to leave the home for a 3 or 4 hour or 5 hour period to participate in sports when it's relatively near at hand for others is not just embracing the concept that we want, if you like, for being an inclusive council. So I'd be keen to see how that might be supported. In the last throwaway line, there was a bit of work carried out in the fund pool a few weeks ago, which is welcome, but it was shut during the fortnight school holidays, and it actually denied kids an opportunity to participate in sport at the very time when they weren't at school and could have done so. So maybe if it was an immediate need, then fine. If it's no, can we ensure that repairs are programmed when there's the least impact or the least opportunities for participation and use of the facilities rather than when it might be a peak period. So thanks that, and Richard might not need to reply, but it is an observation, and I wouldn't mind feedback at some stage. Thanks, Provost.
Thanks, Jim. I don't know, Richard, do you have any comments, sort of response to Jim's comments?
Thanks, Chair. Through you, thanks, Councillor Dempster. Certainly, as Councillor Dempster is aware from my knowledge of the service previously, there was a strong track record of disability and targeted intervention sessions in Upper Nithsdale as well as other parts of the region. And indeed, it's not an unreasonable request to suggest that we should, where possible, target repairs and maintenance work out with school holiday periods. So I'll take both matters back with the relevant colleagues and come back to Councillor Dempster directly.
That's great. Thanks very much, Richard. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks again, Chair. It's on page 88, obviously, it's about the number of private water supplies or risk assessed. The reason why I'm asking about this one, why the Council is doing it, I'm just wondering, Richard, is the Council compliant to the new Scottish water bylaws? Because they've been around businesses and that. We had a nice chap from Lark Hall that visited us the other day regarding the bylaws. Basically, they're checking non-return valve taps and buildings. So I know the Council will maybe have some of them on their depots. I'm just wondering, are they compliant in that?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bell. I'm just wondering whether, through you, check whether Sandra's still on the call, because it's her area of business specifically. Sandra might be able to provide more detailed response than I'll be able to do through you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Sandra, would you like to answer that question from Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I'm afraid I can't answer that because I don't think that that's part of the private water supply remit that we would look at, but I could take that back and find out for you if you would like.
It does come in, they will check.
I'll take that back and find out then. Thank you.
You happy with that, Councillor Bell? I'll come back to you with that information. Councillor Slater.
On page 82, progress in the White Sands project and the confirmed scheme by the government, it states that there was no valid objections received, no valid to the Scottish ministers to confirm the scheme without modifications. Now, the reason for that is that people suddenly realised that this has to be written a legal version of it, and they were denied that because they would have to hire lawyers to do that work for them, to put these objections in at that stage. So therefore, that's probably why there is no objections at that stage, because of legal costs to the people. The other point I'd like to ask, the £25 million scheme, is that an estimate or has it actually been costed? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Slater, but that's kind of not relevant to this, and these were costings that were done at the time when this project was brought forward, and I appreciate your comments about your thoughts on objections, but I don't think Richard can answer any of those questions, but thank you for your comments anyway.
Okay,
anyone else have any comments, any questions? We'll move to recommendations then. Members are asked to review the overall summary of performance within the individual head of service business plans in the Nithsdale area as an appendix. Consider the additional area-based successes and developments as detailed in the key achievements section of this report, paragraph 3.8 to 3.23, and consider any aspects of performance to be referred to the relevant future committees. Councillor Ferguson?
I'm just wondering here if we should actually, I suppose I was the chair of the committee when this was done, but I think there's a need for councillors to actually commend the staff of communities who went way and beyond during COVID. The diversification of the teams who were prepared just to muck in and get things done really needs to be recognised and recognised every single time we talk about it. So it wasn't just the NHS who did this, it was the bin men who were out there, you know, everybody else. I'm just wondering here if we could put another recommendation, it's not a recommendation, but just to commend the staff for their performance during COVID.
That's an excellent point, Councillor Ferguson, and I'm happy to do that. Members happy with that? Can we add that as the recommendation? Thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson. And if Richard would take that back to staff, that would be appreciated. Really, how much that we really do appreciate how everyone went above and beyond.
I'll do that, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
And thank you for your answers to questions today, Richard. So on item 9, Economy and Resources, end of year assessment of business plans, was our final monitoring report. The report mentions that a great deal of the capacity of economic development staff was taken up with the important disbursement of business support grant funds during and post-COVID. It's great to see the good progress that's been made in a number of key projects. It's also good to see that they're spread right across Nithsdale. Now we have Jamie Little and Stuart McMillan to answer any member questions or address any member comments. Gentlemen, do you have anything to add to the report, or are we just happy to go to questions?
So I'm happy to go to questions, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any member questions? Any comments? I have nothing in the... Oh, Councillor Slater.
Just one, it's on page 105. 35.4. It's just the fact that it's called Dynamic Different Dumfries. I have to ask the question, where is all the funding coming to do any of this work? Because that's important.
Which work? Which page are we on, Councillor? Yeah, you need to speak further into the microphone because I'm finding it difficult to hear you. Which page are we on?
Page 105, 3.5.4. It's just the fact that I wondered where this group's going to get the funding for some of all this work it intends to do. That's just an observation. You could say that's an observation possibly at this stage. Anyway, thank you.
I'll put this to the gentleman, to Stuart or Jamie. Is this something you can comment on, or... Yeah, is this something you can comment on?
Yeah. Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Yes, Councillor Slater, as you'll be aware, the plan is extremely extensive and multifaceted and over several years. And the funding for individual parts and parcels of that is something that will be developed on a project-by-project basis, and there will be aspects of the action plan that will be eligible for maybe funding from Historic Scotland or Scottish Government funding, or indeed our own capital expenditure. So the response on funding will be as multifaceted as the range of projects are within the action plan itself.
Thank you, Stuart. Are you happy with that, Councillor Slater?
Partly, yes. Thank you.
So, Vice Chair, you would like him?
Cheers, Chair. Just a wee question for Jamie. I don't know if you know, Jamie, that Wheatley DGHP are demolishing 8 houses in Gladstone Road in Traquair. I just wonder if you've heard anything, if they're got to be replaced, new for old.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. There are an extensive review, or there has been an extensive review of DGHP stock right throughout the region, and some of it has been identified for demolition. The intention is to take that forward and replace, and there have been very early discussions between myself and Wheatley Home South around Traquair. The intention is very much to look at what is the need and what will be put back in place, and potentially coming forward to elected members with a project for the Strategic Housing Investment Plan over the coming months. I'm in regular dialogue, obviously, with the Lochside regeneration proposal, and from that we are also looking at some other areas where works are required to bring forward new more energy efficient properties. So yes, aware of that, and at the earliest opportunity more information will be provided to elected members.
Thanks, Jamie. Cheers.
Thanks, Jamie. That seems positive. Councillor Stevenson.
Hi there, and thanks for the report. On page 107, it continues on from 3.6. The Lochside regeneration, it says TBC next to the units. Is there an update on that? Thank you.
Someone want to come in?
Yep. Yeah, sorry, Chair. I'll come in on that one. Yeah, thanks, Councillor. The numbers that will actually be developed for the Lochside proposal are still some time away. It's going to be heavily informed by engagement with the local community, and also, again, identification of the exact needs. The units that will be provided throughout will be regularly reported to members once it's known. But what's really important is that at this stage, we're kicking off on the major engagement with the local community, getting their input. So too early to say how many will actually be developed there. But a further report will be brought back to the Economy and Resources Committee in January, just giving an update to all elected members as a more formal report for everyone's awareness.
Thanks for that, Jamie. Are you happy with that, Paula? You want to come back in?
I mean, we must have a ballpark figure of how many houses we actually want to build there. I'm just very, part of my casework, a huge part of my casework is actually to do with housing in Lochside, so we must have an idea of how many houses we could potentially build at the very minimum. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the number of properties that are already there, that's significant. The council has those figures in mind. There are some development sites that are also included within the boundary of Lochside, including the former Max High, which is allocated for around 140 homes. There has been the area of demolitions that have gone forward. And the number of units will very much be based on the need and also the aspirations of the local community. So specific numbers aren't really available at the moment. There's going to be a significant difference if we're looking at something like a number of bungalows for older people when compared to potentially if it was identified there needed to be a lot of flats. So it's hard to put an exact number on it right now. There may be further demolitions carried out if that's required as well. So right now, couldn't give a figure, even as a guide, because as the council, what we're trying to do is ensure that we're properly engaging with the local community and also carrying out that specific demand assessment, but obviously looking at opportunities to maximise the investment in the area.
Thanks, Jamie. Is that a bit better, Paul? Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much. This is kind of Jamie again. It's a brilliant regeneration at Lochside, Jamie. I wouldn't complain about that in the slightest. But there's 4 people missing for that regeneration project, and that's 4 councillors.
Yep, thanks, Councillor Ferguson. So, in engagement with Wheatley Home South, we are very much pushing them to improve the communication. I know that's been mentioned previously at Economy and Resources Committee by yourself. So, working very closely with them to ensure there's a proper communications plan put in place. Regular updates are given to yourself and the other members from the area. I also appreciate that through the ward worker, there were some updates in terms of the progress that was being made. But what we've agreed with Wheatley Home South is that a specific update will be provided to all elected members on a monthly basis. Happy also to look at a further meeting between members and the Wheatley Home South to ensure that you are completely up to speed with where things are at the moment.
Happy with that, Andy?
Yeah, I just hope they're better at doing that than they are answering emails. That's all.
Any other member questions or comments? Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Yeah, just a quick one, just to recognise the hard work that the staff had put in, especially when they were distributing the grants. There was business support grants, other grants, etc., to the tune of 92 million. So it's with their effort and dedication, I suppose. So just to put on record that we should thank our staff.
Thanks for that, Councillor Campbell. Any other comments, any questions, or we go to recommendations? Everyone happy? Okay. So members are asked to review the overall summary of performance within the individual head of service business plans in the Nithsdale area, consider the additional area-based successes and developments as detailed in the key successes section of this report, paragraphs 3.4 to 3.6, and consider any aspects of performance to be referred to the relevant future committee, and also to commend staff for the work. So that's great. Thank you very much, Stuart and Jamie, for your contributions. Thank you. Right, we turn to item number 10. That's Nithsdale Area Committee Tackling Poverty and Inequalities Funding. Now, members are being asked to note at 2.1 in the report that there is £76,986 available to third sector organisations across Nithsdale to tackle poverty and inequalities. As anticipated, given the cost of living crisis being experienced in our communities, the fund has been significantly oversubscribed, with requests totalling over 133,000. The scoring panel's recommendations based on the priorities, eligibility and criteria agreed by members are outlined for us to consider. But members are reminded that the final determination of any awards rests with this committee. The scoring panel has recommended awards which would fully utilise the funds available, and therefore members must note that any reduction, increase or addition to the recommended awards will have consequences for the other applications. As the recommendations are based on member criteria, should members wish to propose any changes, they will require to provide appropriate justification and rationale. We've got Lead Officer Derek Heck still available in Teams, but before opening up for member debate, are we happy to note at 2.1 the total tackling poverty and inequalities budget available in Nithsdale is £76,986.46, as outlined in paragraph 3.2. And note at 2.2, the Nithsdale Area Committee Tackling Poverty and Inequalities Fund prioritises eligibility and criteria contained in Appendix 1. Now, we have Derek here, as said, on Teams. Do you have anything to add, Derek, to the report before we turn to member comments and questions?
No, good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. I have nothing further to add to the report, but happy to take questions.
Now, I hadn't planned on going round everything, each application one by one, but to determine them as a block, unless anyone has any specific application that they wish to raise any comment, any issues or comments on. But I think it would take them as a block, as we'd agreed the criteria and the priorities, and this is how we've done so. If members are happy, we'll do that. Councillor Bell first.
Thanks, Chair. I've no issue with taking a block or agreeing recommendations, but one of the things I always like to know is is evaluation process, or an update on how the money's been spent and what's happening in various organisations, some sort of feedback. I don't mean a member session. I don't need another member session for that, but what needs some sort of evaluation or feedback coming from the various groups of being awarded the money. I'd like to see that come forward so we can see that it's been justified.
Derek, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, Chair, thanks, Councillor Bell. Yeah, built into the process, there is a monitoring and an evaluation process, so there will be a future report, an update report to members on how this funding has been spent and what has been achieved using it.
Thank you.
Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Yeah, it was just looking at the scoring. I was surprised just to see that the Nith Valley Leaf Trust, although it's only asking a small amount, but I mean, with those kind of numbers, I thought they would have probably put in a bigger amount, but it's entirely up to those who are applying for it, I suppose. I don't know if Derek has got anything on that. Thanks, Provost.
You get any sort of reaction to those comments, Derek?
No, sorry, I didn't quite pick up a question there, Chair.
I think the sound's quite, if members can be a little bit closer to their microphones and then be able to pick up everything better.
Yeah, can you hear me now, Derek?
Yeah, that's great, Chair, thanks.
Yeah, it was on the table 1 on page 110, the Nith Valley Leaf Trust. I know they've got a small amount coming to them, but they've got a reasonable high score. I was just wondering what was the reason for only asking for such a small amount. Thanks, Derek.
Thanks, Councillor. I'm just trying to find the page. On page 115, 117, you'll see on 115, the applicant was actually requesting £1,049. The recommendation for the 524.50 is 50% based on their score. So they did come in for an increased amount of grant, but based on the scoring framework, they're only being recommended for 50%.
You happy with that, Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, happy with that. If you want to go for, taking everything on block, I'm happy with that as well, Provost.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, good morning, Derek. It's 311. I'm kind of looking for an assurance that the 3 organisations got a nil award were actually contacted and made aware before the papers were published. It would be a hell of a thing to drop through the lift the standard and read that you weren't getting anything when you thought you might. So just that kind of assurance.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yes, absolutely, Councillor Ferguson. All applicants, whether they're being recommended for an award or recommended for nil award, were sent an email when the papers were published so that they could go on and see what was being recommended. And indeed, we've been contacted by a number of the applicants and provided additional information, reminding the applicants that these are recommendations at this stage until members will ultimately make their decision today.
Happy with that, Andy? Yeah. Any? Jim, Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Provost, and I'm sure it'll be right, but I'm kind of concerned that one of the biggest areas in the SIMD, the Scottish Indices of Multiple Deprivation, have not an application lodged for any of this money. I find that really concerning, and I just want to check with Derek that folks in the Upper Nithsdale area actually knew about this fund and the opportunity to bid into it. Having said that, of the applications and the recommendations, I'm content with that. I'm also content if other members are to take forward £112.71 to next year's discretionary budget or tackling poverty and inequalities funding. So I'm not going to go against any recommendations. I think there's no point in us setting up a scoring panel and then starting to tinker with the outcomes. I'm just concerned that it would appear that there hasn't been any application from an area that's recognised as suffering from deprivation. And as long as the organisations that work within that area have been given the opportunity to bid then I'm absolutely content with the work that Derek's done and the recommendations set out. Promise. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Derek, do you want to come in with that? Maybe some comments on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Dempster. Yeah, absolute assurance that all applicant or all organisations who we are working close with, who we know are tackling poverty and inequalities, in the ward that was mentioned, were contacted by not only the local ward officer, but also other support organisations through the locality hubs. So we have promoted it widely to those who are previous applicants, but also those who are working within that particular sphere at the moment. So significant promotion of the opportunities where available. Members will be aware of the tight timescales we're working to. There was only a 4-week turnaround period for applications, but there's certainly been support and discussions had with organisations in the ward that refers to.
Thanks, Derek. Are you happy with that, Jim? Well, not happy, but are you content with that response?
Oh, I'm absolutely content, yes, and I knew Derek would have. I'm just satisfying myself that communication was made with every organisation, and not just in my ward, but right across the whole ward, that we give everybody the opportunity, because clearly it's all about tackling poverty and inequality. So no, and on that basis, Provost, I'm happy to propose we go with the recommendations as set out in the paper on 3 of whatever it is, the last 2 recommendations that we still have to determine or decide on. I'm happy to go with Officer's recommendations as set out in the papers. Thanks, Provost.
Thanks, Jim. Councillor Ferguson, you want back?
Yes, please, Provost. Thanks very much. Derek, it's an old hot potato, this one, but in the past we've helped organisations who don't have, in inverted commas, professional grant writers, right? Because one of the aims behind this scheme when we set it up was for all organisations could access it. It should be easy to access and everything else. And what's coming across here is that the organisations that are particularly good at writing applications are meeting all the criteria because they're professionals. Okay, let's be honest about it. And some of the smaller organisations have got less experience in that, and they're suffering for it. And I suppose I'm just looking for some sort of assurance that we're doing something to make sure that the smaller organisations are as well equipped to fill these forms in as the big organisations.
Thanks, Andy. Do you want to come in with that, Derek?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. Yes, as part of the review that we carry out annually to the grants process that we're involved in through the area committees, we have adapted the application form, taken on board the feedback that the members just given, so that the form has been reduced in size and significantly, and there is support there through not only ward officers but through third sector Dumfries and Galloway and through locality hub members to organisations, and indeed an offer will be made to those applications, particularly those who maybe haven't been recommended for an award today and would potentially benefit from capacity building support, that an offer will be made following any agreement of awards or not today. So if that assurance helps the member, we will obviously review the application forms and the guidance and bring that back to a member seminar for any future grant schemes that are being agreed by this committee. But that assurance that we are working closely with those communities that may need additional support.
Happy, Andy? And thanks, Derek. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second the comments Councillor Ferguson's made. In particular, the point I was wanting to raise is the actual time for the funding. So it was opened on the 3rd and the closing date was the 31st of October, which is an incredibly short time scale, especially if, say, certain groups need to wait until they have a meeting in place or whatever that is. And I imagine that will have affected some of the turnaround for putting in the grants. Is there any way we can seek assurance that next time this will actually be extended to allow for meetings and things to happen?
Thanks, Councillor Stevenson. I think, if you remember, this committee made the decision to get the grants out as quick as possible. I think that's why by the time it came to us and we made that decision, we tried to open that as soon as possible so that we could get the funds out as soon as possible. Derek, do you want to come in and add anything to that?
Yeah, just to confirm, Chair, absolutely right. The members were very keen at the previous committee that decisions were taken at this committee in November to ensure that those projects which were tackling poverty and inequalities could be supported as soon as possible. And in order to do that, we've had to tighten up all the timescales. So as Councillor Stevenson rightly acknowledges, we normally give applicants 6 weeks for our grant processes. Unfortunately, that was cut to 4 weeks. But also within our the officer assessments, they were also cut in time from normally 2 to 3 weeks to 1 week for the compliance checks, then a further 1 week for the scoring panel assessment. So everything was tightened up in order to bring those applications to you today, Chair. But absolutely, where at all possible, we endeavour to have our 6 week application period, which hopefully, as Councillor Stevenson highlighted, covers that. If organisations are having meetings on a monthly basis, a 6 week period would allow that monthly meeting to be taken into that time frame. But absolutely acknowledge what the member's saying, Chair.
Thanks for that, Derek. And I think Councillor Stevenson have to acknowledge that I think that time scale was skewed because of the death of Her Majesty the Queen. And I think that's why it was shortened. There was a certain period of time where we couldn't do anything, so that would take that 2 weeks away from that. So I think it's not normal that we shorten that 6 week period. So I think that was out with our control, out with officers' control also.
No, that's great, Chair. It's just to make other organisations aware that next time it won't be this short, and we will give them that time next time. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Councillor Dempster, you wish back in?
Yes, Provost, through your indulgence, just in the back of what Paula was saying, I've just checked, and the next Nithsdale Area Committee meeting is scheduled for the 8th of March, which means that any budget decision on the 31st of March or at full council sometime in March may well cause a 3-month delay before we decide on how we're going to spend the money. So I wonder if you might be able to ensure that any budget decision for the 2023-24 year, the Nithsdale Area Committee meet sometime immediately after that, or after Communities Committee, at the most appropriate juncture to deal with any budget allocation we might get, rather than just wait for a cycle which might take us into June before we start discussions about grant applications again, especially for the fund we're discussing at the moment. Thanks, Provost.
Thanks very much for that, Jim. Thanks for your comments. Are there any other member questions? No? Everyone happy? That's fine. I want to note as well in 3.12 there will be £112.71 left if we agree these recommendations when I run through the recommendations, which is recommended such a low level of budget to close the fund and carry forward to the next year. So I'll go to recommendations now and add that in. So members are asked to note the total tackling poverty and inequalities budget available in Nithsdale is £76,986.46 as outlined in paragraph 3.2. Note the Nithsdale Area Committee Tackling Poverty and Inequalities Fund priorities, eligibility and criteria contained in Appendix 1. Considering the scoring panel's recommendations as set out in Appendix 2 and detailed in paragraphs 3.7 to 3.11, agreeing awards as appropriate. And subject to the decision at 2.3, agree how to utilise any remaining budget as outlined in 3.12 to 3.14, which do members agree to close this budget now, close this fund now and carry forward to the next year? Thank you, members. So we move to item 11, Nithsdale Area Committee Discretionary Budget 22-23 update. Now this report provides members with a further update on allocations from the Nithsdale discretionary budget. Members will be pleased to see the Christmas lights erected across our communities and switched on last weekend by community councils in Kirkconnell, Sanquhar and Thornhill, and by our youth work team in Dumfries. There's been a very positive feedback regarding the committee's allocation of funds to support utility costs for community centres, town halls and village halls, and members will be pleased to note the spread of support right across our wards in Nithsdale supporting these vital community assets. We again have Derek Heck still available in Teams before going to members. Derek, do you have anything to add to your report?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've got a few updates, Chair, if I may. The emergency electrical works to facilitate the Christmas lights at Sanker Tolbooth and at the Pegasus in Thornhill were completed recently, and we have received very positive comments from the local communities around these iconic features having lights on them again this year. As outlined in 3.2 of the report, Chair, there has been some issues identified by the supplier of the upgraded switches during their testing. These switches will allow the remote control of the Christmas lights across all 4 of the communities where the area committee are supporting the Christmas lights. Unfortunately, this delay has meant that they're not available for this year. However, colleagues have given a commitment to work closely with the suppliers to ensure the appropriate solution works for us for next year and in future years. In addition, Chair, we are aware of an issue connected to the current switches that are on these lights that resulted in a small number of lights not being illuminated in Kirkconnell and Sanker during the switch-on event. This was due to a tripped switch, which colleagues identified relatively quickly over the weekend and were able to get repaired. However, despite extensive testing of those, we are aware that there are still a small number of lights not illuminated in Kirkconnell and Sanker, and colleagues have instructed electrical repairs to take place, which should have, if they've not taken place already, they will be completed by the end of the week. With regards to the Utility Support Fund, this has proved extremely popular in supporting our community centres, village halls and town halls as they experience increasing utility costs. But since publishing the report, Chair, there have been a further 2 applications which have received support. So just to update the table 2, that Cullen Village Hall has received £222.91 and Kirkmahoe Village Hall has received £280.31. This therefore means that the total budget provided by this committee of £14,116.22 has now been fully allocated. So when it comes to the recommendations, Chair, we'll have to update recommendation 2.2 and 2.3 to reflect this. That's everything that I've got to update, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that update, Derek. So members will need to update the recommendations when we come to those. And it's unfortunate what happened with the light switch on, but it does show that we made the right decision in upgrading and maintain some maintenance work on these. So I am happy to go to member questions now. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, just to make a declaration of interest, it wasn't in the papers about Cullen Village Hall. I'm the treasurer of that hall, so I won't take part in that particular item if you want to take it as an individual item. But being treasurer, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to say anything on that. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you for that. I don't intend again to go through them all one at a time, do it as a block, but thank you for that declaration anyway. Councillor Ferguson.
Derek, can you give us a wee bit more information about the switch situation? If I picture it right, you're saying we can't, or the preferred tenderers can't get the equipment they require at this moment in time. Is that what you said? Because my worry here is if they come back in 6 months' time, or even 6 weeks' time, the way inflation's going, the amount we've set aside might not be anywhere near it. So maybe we need to keep a closer eye on that than we do there. The other question, of course, would be is, are these switches, are they no part of the street furniture or part of the council estate? So why are they getting dealt with by a grant rather than through repair and maintenance?
Would you like to come in on those, Derek, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. The switches, there are currently switches on the lights, but these are analogue switches which require manual settings, so they come on at a specific time. When the issue that we've experienced is these switches have tripped, and therefore they need to be manually back on. The upgraded switches which the committee have agreed an allocation for will be Bluetooth technology, so they can be controlled remotely to the system. So should that happen, it's simply a case of doing something on the computer or on a tablet device that can be done remotely and fixed relatively quickly. When the supplier has been testing that technology, there are some glitches that they are working through to improve. But as I understand it, the budget that's available will be sufficient to cover the cost based on the number of switches that we would require. In terms of being part of the council estate, my understanding is they are not. These are specific switches that are used in Nithsdale to facilitate the Christmas lights that this area committee contribute towards. They are not part of the general council estate, is my understanding.
So I suppose, could I come back in, Provost? Yeah. So
Sure.
suppose here, let's say they fail. Who's liable? Is it the council's insurance? If it is, then they clearly are the council's responsibility.
Yeah, any work undertaken by the area committee would fall under the wider council's responsibility, but in terms of maintenance and repair, that would fall to the area committee.
Well, we didn't have any electricians, Derek, with the best will in the world. We're expecting whoever's contracted by the council to do the electrical work. But my point is, if it's owned by the council, if it's a grant and we're buying something, why is this no getting purchased under the normal maintenance budget of council assets? That's the point I'm getting at here. Because we're taking 35 grand out of a discretionary scheme, which could go to other causes.
Aren't we using these funds to facilitate, like, but a Nithsdale priority, a Christmas lights priority? It's not as such council furniture, but
Well, that's my point. Whose furniture is it, Chair? Because if somebody was to be injured by it, for example, right, and I'm no dooming and glooming here, and I'm no the Grinch at Christmas, right? Somebody would have to answer for it, and that's the question. I appreciate, Derek, it's unfair. I've dumped this on you. I should probably give you some advance warning of the question, because it's maybe a question we need answered, and that would allow us to carry forward the 35k, because that's what we're doing, because we're not giving the company 35k today to come back in a few months' time and tell us it's got to be 38k.
do you have anything else to add? I apologise as well for throwing this at you, Derek.
No, happy to assist members. I'm happy to go back to the relevant operational colleagues and seek and Councillor Ferguson makes. In terms of the £35,000, a decision has already been made to allocate that £35,000, unless, of course, members wish today to reallocate that. But absolutely, that funding will not be released to the supplier until the technology is available. Are assured that it meets whatever needs are. If that's suitable, Chair, I'm happy to go back to colleagues, get an update and provide that to all members.
I think an update would be perfect. Members are not minded to reallocate anything to overturn any decision. I think just Councillor Ferguson's needing some clarification.
I'm quite happy to leave this as delegated to the council officers to deal with, and then update us as the whole thing goes forward. Again, the point is maybe better made in another committee as to why they're not doing it, rather than why we're doing it as an area committee. So I'll leave it just now. Let's go with the recommendations, because the only thing I would say was with the 35k part is that's delegated to council officers to manage the process through with the preferred supplier, as we would normally do anyway. So I'm comfy with that, Provost, if everybody else is.
No, that's fine. Thanks very much. Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Provost. I don't want to muddy the water further in the issues that Councillor Ferguson has raised, but in Sankirk, Cornwall and Thornhill, the infrastructure belongs to Amy Highways or Transport Scotland. and we have a contractual arrangement with them to install Christmas lights on their street furniture. As far as insurance goes, as far as I understand it, we have Zurich International who deal with any claims against the council, and if something were to happen, there would be a normal or a standard procedure to be followed. I don't think we insure individual items. In fact, I'm certain we don't, simply because of the cost that would be in individual items being insured by the council, but certainly protected against any incidents that might happen, provided we or our contractors follow the guidance and procedures expected when they carry out electrical installations. I'm happy with the recommendations. I am pleased to see the work that Derek's done. I think that the community facilities suggestion that Derek brought to us was a very, very good one. It has served the reputation of the council well, and hopefully we can expand that going forward. I'm interested in how soon, or if, and it'll be for you, Provost, I think, we're having a grant seminar, because there is a discussion I would like to introduce today, and if I can, or certainly a grant seminar, and with your indulgence, want to briefly outline it today, because again, it's working with community groups, and we have a drive to support communities in what they do. So I'll maybe let that hang, Provost, to see what you think. It'll only be a minute or two of your time, and it's something certainly to be taken to a grant seminar. And if Derek knew of my thoughts today, it would give him time maybe to do some work prior to the grant seminar taking place. So I'll leave other members, unless you want me to outline what my thoughts are, Provost, and it would be about something for us to look at in the future, and probably at no cost, but certainly something we as an organisation would have to do. I'll wait on your response, Provost.
I think it's a really good suggestion, but I think maybe something we take offline. But I think it's definitely a grant seminar would be very beneficial to members. I think members would agree. But if we could take that offline, Jim, that would be great.
And do you want me to outline what my thoughts are to all Nithsdale Area Committee members and to Derek, or do you want to hear some of it now?
Yeah. Was it members are saying leave it to Derek? Sorry, Derek.
No, that's fine. If you delegate it to Derek, Provost, I will be absolutely delighted. Him and Fiona, between them, I'm sure, can bring something back to members. But I'm really anxious. It's about a community group in my ward who work really hard, needing a bit of support to get a blockage within the council freed up. And I find I'll write to Derek and Fiona at length. I'll copy every Nithsdale Area Committee member in, and we'll see how that discussion goes. And I'm glad, Provost, you've suggested that I can take that forward in an informal way at the moment. Thanks, Provost.
No, thanks very much. We'd appreciate that, Jim. Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I was working with a group who unfortunately couldn't benefit from, so page 152, the funds towards their energy costs, but they are a group who provide a warm space, they provide activities free that would really normally come under the normal rules. So I'm just trying to get a direction on where else I might be able to steer them for funding, and maybe I need to speak to Derek direct about that.
Yeah, I think probably that's an offline one with Derek, and he'd be able to assist you in directing sort of signposts in your organisation. Thanks, Kim. Councillor Barretti.
Seeing as the word mud has been used, and trying to look through this and get some clarity, and from Councillor Ferguson's point, I'm trying to understand, when we're talking about switches now, are we talking about the actual physical switch, or is it the program that runs the switches which may be not interfacing with the switches? What exactly? Because we're talking about two different things here, are we not? We're talking about a digital aspect and a physical aspect.
I can turn that to Derek to answer, but what's your reasoning for knowing that question?
I think we've also had other areas such as road where we're trying to roll out programs, digital programs that are not interfacing with some of the things that the our customers want to do. And so I'm just wondering, is this a modernisation problem? Is it a digital problem? Is it a program problem? Is it a computer problem? Because these switches, if I'm not mistaken, they're not analog, so therefore they're working at a distance, and it's that, you know, it's that interconnection. Is it not interconnecting? What's the reason?
Are you able to answer that, Derek?
Probably not fully, Chair, if I'm brutally honest, but I'll have a go. The switches that are currently in place at the moment are timers. So they're analog timers that are on these switches, which require to be manually set and manually reset if required. The improvement that the area committee has invested in would, these switches would still be physical switches, but we would be able to remotely connect to them. So should they need reset, then officers wouldn't need to attend with ladders to go up the pole and manually reset them. They could be done from a remote location. Can I also just add, Chair, that it may help members just to understand the liability and the insurance aspect, that members will recall that we significantly contributed to a contract with a company to provide the lights. So the actual physical lights themselves are not owned by the council. They're not owned by the area committee. We lease them from this company. So that may assist members in understanding there may be insurance involved in that, but I will get a full response on that from relevant colleagues as well.
That's great, thanks, Derek. You happy with that, Councillor Barretti?
Nearly. It just means that there must be an extra component if it's the original switches. Therefore, they're having to be upgraded, because if they are the original switches and they wouldn't have had this ability prior to this upgrade, what's the upgrade apart from the fact that it's a Bluetooth?
It's also operational. We've had.
Please.
So, yes, Councillor Dempster.
Point of order. Can we maybe contain ourselves to the business we're dealing with, because we need to be careful we're not straying into management or operational issues. It's all very well as wanting to understand how switching works, and that can be done offline with the professional team. But that's not what we're here today for, to work out how switches are working.
No, you're quite right, Councillor Dempster. I was just about to tell Councillor Barretti that that's an operational thing. We delegate these powers to the officers, and if you wish to know, you could probably speak to the officers themselves. Thanks. Councillor Slater?
No, it's all right. I was going to ask Derek if these switches are CDs, and that's why they residual current.
Again, not really for this committee.
I won't say any more about that. Derek will probably deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions relating to the papers? No? Everyone okay? Right, we'll move to recommendations. So are we happy to note at 2.1 the allocations agreed by Nithsdale Area Committee from the remaining discretionary budget for 2022-23 are as detailed in paragraph 3.1 and table 1. 2.2, note the awards made to facilities from the Community Centre, Town Hall and Village Hall Utility Support Fund as detailed in paragraph 3.5 and table 2, adding, since following Derek's update, that the Cullen Village Hall will receive £222.91 and Kirkmahoe Village Hall £280.31, which, as I said, have been updated by the lead officer, Derek. And 2.3, note the fund is now fully committed and closed. So we move to item number 12, the disposal of land at Back Row, Gastown, Dumfries. Who have we got? Oh, we have Catherine Swan will answer any member questions or address any member comments regarding this issue. Do you have anything to add, Catherine? Just happy to take questions.
Good morning. I think it's still morning, Chair, members and all attendees. I've got nothing further to add. However, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Did any members have any questions? Councillor Ferguson?
Have we already ruled on this? Is this the ground that came to us before?
Did you hear that, Catherine? Is this something that we've already ruled on? Is this a ground that's came to us in a previous committee?
Yes, it came to the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee in August. Sorry, on 25th of August this year, the Communities Committee agreed that the land was declared surplus and should be disposed of in accordance with the acquisitions, which is why it's come to Nithsdale Area Committee.
That's probably our confusion, because those of us on communities will probably remember this piece of land. Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, I was a wee bit confused when I seen this as well. It seems sort of back to face. I would have thought it would have came here first, and the final committee would have been FPT.
Thanks for your comments. Councillor Slater?
Yes, this piece of land, obviously say it's surplus now. Now, it could be, will it be sold? Is it possible it could be sold off as a council, the council asset will be sold off? Because many councils now are looking for land to put solar panels in for communities and that. And once you sell the land or the asset, it's gone. So some councils now are having to buy land out with their areas to actually build solar farms. And also some councils now are renting roof space off large companies to put solar panels on
Point
it.
of order, Provost.
Yes, Councillor Dempster?
This is a note to this committee that the land has been deemed surplus. Note the community councils listed, and we're only asked to advise if there are any further group or members who wish to consult with regard to potential community use. We're not being asked to decide what the land's been used for or whether or no it's been made surplus. That decision's already been made. It's only to ensure that community groups are consulted as part of the process. And David's right, he has a point, but it's not for today, I would suggest.
Thank you, Councillor Dempster. I fully agree, and we'll move on. This is not for this report. Any other?
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
I think I was misunderstood here, because the last time there was ground in that location, there was one of the owners of the houses wanted it for a car park, if I remember correctly. Right. Is this different piece of land? Because on the map it looks remarkably like the same. Now, it might be that the officer doesn't have that information. I mean, I'm quite happy to go along with this, but it'd be nice to know. There was it before, Dave, there was a bit came in. I'm sure the householder at the end bought the land.
Yeah, I remember that, but then when Catherine had said that it had come to communities, then I thought maybe that's where I was remembering it from. Has this came to us already, Catherine? Which I believe that if it did come to us, I'm sure that we agreed that this land was surplus.
Yes, this is the same piece of land. However, when you look at the plan, the triangle on the end has already been declared surplus in a previous report.
So it's kind of an extension onto that land. It's an extra piece. So it's the same area, exactly the same address, but it's just a piece of land just slightly over. No, that's
slightly
great.
Different piece of
Yes.
land. Yes.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that clarity. We were all a little bit confused here because we remember the report coming to us previously. So no, thanks for that clarification. Any more questions from members? Nothing on Teams, nothing in the room, so I'll move to recommendations. Members are asked to note that 464 square metres of land at Backrow Street, Gastown, Dumfries is surplus to council requirements. And 2, note that the community councils and groups listed at paragraph 3.5 in this report have been consulted with regard to potential community uses, and advise if there are any further groups members wish to consult with regards to potential community use. Members, thank you very much, Vice. So we move to item number 13, the appointment of outside body. So members, our final report is regarding the appointment to the Nith District Salmon Fishery Board. Now, Tracy Sonko will answer any member questions or address any member comments. Can I first ask Tracy, how many times does this organisation meet? How many meetings per year?
Thanks, Chair. The board meets 4 times per year.
Just so that members know what they're... So do we have anyone... Councillor Ferguson?
No, I'm not volunteering. I've just recently resigned from that, and we haven't had a meeting since May. So, whilst to say they meet 4 times a year, no. Governance know the reason why I resigned from it, and it's a personal matter. So, but they are, unless they're going to have 4 meetings in the next few months, they don't hold 4. I, for one, I can't see the benefit of having a councillor on it, to be frank, but I mean, that's for others to decide.
Is there, I mean, I know that when we have outside bodies, we have the form and such like, they fill in why they require a member on. Has there been justification for a member requirement?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, when we done the review in May this year, when it went to full council, their questionnaire would have been part of that overall report detailing why they requested a member to sit on it. It's up to members whether they decide to appoint or not, and then we can pick it up through the review next year if members don't wish to appoint at this time.
Councillor Dempster?
I am not volunteering, Provost, but no, I think should refer members to page 1624.1.1. The very last line says the appointed councillor will represent the interests of the town water. So it is important that someone, and maybe from the Common Good Committee or whoever, should look after the interests of the town water, because an income comes from that. But I can't. It's no fair for me to suggest what somebody else should do. I'm certainly not able to do it, but someone maybe should, Provost. Thank you.
Thanks for your input there, Jim. Councillor Walters?
Just as some information before I say I'm not volunteering, are the meetings held in the evening, for instance, or is it possible I might be able to go to them? Is it daytime meetings?
Are the daytime meetings, you think, Councillor Bell? Is that, do you know, you have that clarity? You don't know, but Councillor Bell has prior knowledge, so daytime. Councillor Lowe?
I am volunteering.
Yay, not someone who started the conversation with I'm not volunteering. You'd like to volunteer to do this? That's very much appreciated. Any other members wish to come in and not volunteer or volunteer? So, yeah, second and third aid and fourth, I think we have now an appointed member. Thanks very much, Councillor Lowe. So I'll go to recommendations. Members are asked to agree to appoint one elected member, Councillor Lowe, to the Nith District Salmon Fishery Board as detailed in paragraph 4.1. Now we'll move on to item 14, which is if there's any other business deemed urgent. And I've no other business, so that concludes the meeting. So can I thank you all for your contributions and your robust scrutiny. Thanks very much, members. Councillor Campbell?
Well done, Provost. Well done.
I was just going to say before we go on to the Common Good, can we have a comfort break, please?
Yes, I think. How much a break will... What time are we sitting at? 10 past. Well, we start at past.